So as you all know, this session is about expectations from CTOs. The scene about startups, the expectations from startups keeps changing every 10 years or so. And one of these expectations is the increased emphasis on tech, increased emphasis on roadmap. And tech is just not about coding. It extends beyond your feature releases. It extends beyond your bugs and whatnot, right? So when we were researching about what do we do for DevCon, this was one of the most important questions that came up. What's going to be the expectation, guys? And that's why we thought, why not have a session and ask, straight up the investors as well. So that's the context of this session. So let me start off. So one of the top questions that we got is simple yet straightforward. To Ravi specifically. So what's your expectation from a CTO? And specifically about a CTO's vision of the technology roadmap, and how does it change between early stage and late stage?
Thanks, Chameli. Thank you, folks. I think the answer to that question, Chameli, by the way, would certainly vary across stages. So we are a seed-focused fund, so we look at seed, sometimes pre-seed, but mostly in that seed, pre-Series A cohort. There, it's very young. CTO as a title of what you might envision in a very large company is very, very different, that role. And at seed stage, if anything, velocity really matters, right? Velocity of development, True. Velocity of going out, right? Yeah. Experimenting. And I know Hari was speaking before. By the way, big fan. Since the time they were interview street actually from that time, and he was saying that you don't have enough data to at all the times. So true. And within that chaos, how can you experiment? How can you increasingly iterate very, very quickly? And I think there the mindset of the CTO, you could be building for the long haul, but keep in mind the stage of the company.
Yeah,
right?
All this while handling the very first downtime you're going to get, the very first spike in users you're going to get. We had some interesting conversations around how early stage is.
Yeah, absolutely. So that, I think, is the number one priority, is what we look at, and just given specifically the stage that we're at. Besides that, I think, again, a CTO at a seed stage, and maybe even this extends beyond that, maybe as you grow into a Series A, Series B, how can you attract top tech talent? Because early stage, the companies don't have a lot going, right? By definition, you're just starting out. You don't have, a lot of brand recognition. You don't have, large coffers or large customers to go by, and maybe investors like us who not a lot of people know, let's say. So the CTO, needs to be able to attract the top tech talent, because that is extremely important for the business to grow. Again, in the early stage. And tech talent, I'm sure the very smart folks in the room, everyone just wants to work with the brightest minds, right? It's absolutely true, hands down. So if anything else, let aside the branding and the funding and everything else, but if they find the right leadership, that is willing to give them the dope, that is actually having intellectual conversations with them, I think that even more than the competition and everything else, it attracts talent. And I think that becomes a beehive, a magnet for top talent. So I think that those two things are extremely important for us as we look at CTOs at this stage. Besides that, I think the other questions I forget, you were asking about how it evolves, right? What the roadmap is. So that, I think, there's a lot of feedback that comes in from the market. We have to look at is there enough? So there's always this balance. I'm sure you've talked about this, the technical debt, throughout the last two days.
Of course.
So there's a balancing act that the CTO has to invariably do, right? How are you able to do that? You can patch together certain solutions. You have to go to market quickly, but you have to be cognizant of your technical debt. Sooner or later, it's going to come back to haunt us. So how can we balance that? And also with product folks, again, early on in the journey of the company, I think a lot of the product and technology is together. Only later in the life cycle do they kind of separate out. So to be able to relate with the consumers or your customers, whoever they are, and to be able to then quickly convert that. So that vision, I think, is very important because again, this is not a stage where the CTO could be in a silo doing some great R&D work and so on, right? So you have to really be out there, perhaps even talking to your customers and converting that with the product, whoever. Sometimes the CTO is also the product person in the team. And sometimes the CEO, the business person.
That's most of the times.
Yeah,
CTO
right?
being the product. Sometimes even the design person.
Exactly, right? They got to do everything. So to be able to take that and convert that into a solution, the problem that we're trying to solve for the customer, and convert that into the solution, I think that is extremely important, as from their roadmap perspective. And then I know it evolves. Perhaps you can talk about it more. But was what the last part of the question was? As it evolves, we talked a little bit about that. But you have to think about how perhaps you got to start managing. You get 5 engineers and you get 20 engineers. You got 50 engineers. That skill set is extremely. It varies over time. So maybe the CTO is able to do it. Maybe they don't. Maybe they hire a VP of engineering to do that. That's quite likely. But that is that's how kind of we look at the evolution. There's more, but I'll stop there.
Yeah. And just to add a little here, we've seen journeys. Yeah, right. So we've seen journeys wherein CTOs have progressed from a seed to a B, and a C stage, and their roles dramatically shifted. Hari was here previously, and he was saying that you're a 2-people team, you're starting out, you are an SD1 primary, you need to write all the code, perhaps. And at that point in time, you're also the product manager, you're also the designer, like you mentioned, and also at the same point in time, you're also selling, right? You understand the product best, you end up selling the product. That changes and transitions. Ravi just mentioned about tech debt. I think so. What we've seen CTOs evolve into are people who are developing culture of coding and the documentation piece very seriously as they approach a slightly growthish stage, and then eventually the focus on R&D into the larger vision coming in as they move forward in the expansion phase as well, right? So that's an overall journey. CTOs need to evolve, like most of us have to as well, as the startup progresses. So that's the only thing I'd like to add.
Got it. Is this mic working? Okay, it's working. Cool. Thanks, guys. So then that was really well put. The next question is more of a little bit of real life stuff. So far it was about expectations. So when you are at board meetings, generally your technical updates are about what features you've built, how many features are in backlog, how many features are in like your freezer box, so on and so forth. But what would you expect from a CTO, being an investor?
The one thing that really stands out primarily is, of course, feature releases. It's not practically feature releases in the black box. It's more or less where does the deadlock lie. We were supposed to hit, let's say, a certain milestone, and that milestone generally starts from top in terms of metrics, like this is where the company had to be performance-wise. And is it because a feature didn't go out? Is it because of what didn't happen? So that is something that CTOs need to be on top of. The other thing which becomes increasingly important is where are you going to be spending your time, right? There are instances wherein there are tech cycles that change. A lot of what you're doing can now be replaced or not be replaced. And how are you featuring that into your future product changes, etc., also matters. And lastly, it is always great to understand from a CTO's perspective what do the users want and how are you going to incorporate that moving forward as well. So generally, what I'm trying to hint here is that business and tech need to be on the same page. And that is what generally comes out in these board meetings, if they are or not.
Got it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this last point is actually critical, like hands down, because in fact, oftentimes, especially as the company maybe even grows beyond seed to 20 odd people, there are, everyone is building and doing their best but every wheel has to be moving the same direction, with the same velocity. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So board meetings are actually a good opportunity to reconcile that. I'm sure team meetings happen, but oftentimes again they're very focused on the project that they're working on, or the go-to-market motion that the CEO might be or CRO might be looking at. But the board meeting, and again, board meeting is a loose term for this stage, right? These are not, I assume that's what you mean. These are more like, perhaps monthly. These are not necessarily technically board meetings. These are meetings with, your stakeholders, everyone coming together. And that's a great point to actually reconcile where everyone is headed. They need to be headed in the same direction, same velocity. Otherwise, the rocket ship kind of breaks apart.
I was reading somewhere that, the success, so there was this report which highlighted co-founders and their past data as to where did they come from, what was happening, and who was successful, and trying to give data points on that. It highlighted that CTOs who had business acumen were more likely to succeed compared to CTOs who didn't. And that is generally reflected in the organizations moving forward with the same vision or not.
Got it. This was a study. That's nice.
I'll share the link with you.
Of course, that will be really helpful. We'll share it with you guys. So moving on, the next question was more of how do you grow yourself? I'm sure there are a lot of early stage CTOs here. There are a lot of late stage folks also here. But the transition when you move from an early stage, at early stage you're more like an IC, where you, like you said, it's more of you're the tech person, you're the product, you're design, you're pretty much CISO also. But as you move ahead beyond Series C or above, you're gonna end up becoming some more of a people leader, where you attract talent, where you become the face of branding, and less of a coding person. But this transition is going to be huge, and this is going to happen very quickly, within a span of even 4-5 years. How do you look at this transition as an investor? At different stages, do you have different expectations from the CTOs? Do you have like gauging points? This question was to both of you from the audience. So we'd like both of your comments.
Sure. So like you rightly said, it evolves, and we've said before that like everyone else, CTOs need to evolve and grow. One, and I forget who to attribute this. This is not mine, so I will just borrow it. As the CTO grows, they need to grow from chief today officer to chief tomorrow officer. Right? We probably heard this before. So that is really, really critical, right? And that's where balancing the tech debt comes in. So while we were iterating very fast, we were breaking fast and moving ahead. What we have to start doing is now start planning. Let's say we have a first set of customers, right? Our PMF is there, and we are understanding what is the pull from the market. So now you got to figure out how to balance this quarter by quarter. And that really becomes a marathon as opposed to a sprint. So that difference is really, really key. And it's key for across the team, not just the CTO. And different people will join in, folks who are doing everything together, as an IC, they will start having more perhaps specialized contributions. And at the back of that, one thing that stands out also is, again, integrating all of that, making sure that the team is in sync. Even the entire tech team is in sync, right? The product, the front and the back end. And there, again, people management, I was speaking about it before. I think, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with a CTO not being a great people manager. So just, everyone is different. CTO's biggest contribution is to think strategically from from the product vision, from tech vision of the company. Make sure that we are scalable, we are secure, and so on. So hey, if it doesn't, there's no shame in asking for help. Getting a VP of engineering, making sure that your people operations from a tech standpoint are taken care of. So that, but a lot of people kind of tend to either sideline it or not realize it. There is, again, thinking that, oh, there is a CTO here, why do we need a VP engineering? But believe me, it helps a lot, like literally.
Yeah, just on this, I have an anecdote to share. It's something that I saw firsthand, but not naming anyone. What really happened was one of the best engineering minds that I have seen personally really great, wanted to implement a change in terms of tech stack, had a very lean team of, I don't know if you'll call it lean or not, 15, 20 odd people in the engineering team. And the engineering team was not aligned, primarily because they've been like used to what they were doing.
And 15, sorry to interrupt, 15, 20 engineering team members at what stage of the company?
Bish.
Bish, okay.
Okay. At that point in time, to what Ravi just mentioned, the inability, while you were great at development, you were great at building the vision, everything that was proposed was factually correct, right? It was the right thing to do for the company. To not be able to get that across to the team, either via yourself or someone else, became critical, and that was a time of huge friction for the entire team as well as the company, right? So either you evolve into it or at least acknowledge that there's something wrong and seek help, perhaps is the best way to go forward. This acknowledgement is actually harder than evolving, and I've seen a lot of people struggle with that. So perhaps something to factor into once the stage of the company evolves as well.
Got it. And there was one last question from the audience. And this was more of an example than a question, where a CTO has significantly influenced the fate of a company, or be it success or failure, both. Do you guys have any examples or anything that you have seen that the audience would like to know about it?
I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind was, generally, the first thing to quote is it's never a single person show, it's always beyond. So even when you feel that the CEO has done great stuff, whatever's happening in the tech field is also equally important, and perhaps does not come into limelight enough, and it should. But there's one place that just stuck up when you asked this question, which was what happened in 2020 in terms of the pandemic, and suddenly Zoom, for example, was at 10 million users daily to 300 million users daily, and that would have disrupted everything had the tech not been as strong as it was, or what they were able to do it in a time of 3 weeks would have generally taken multiple sprints to get across. So that to me is the first thing I always think of when technical moments come to the fore.
Got it.
Yeah. I mean, that was such a great example. I mean, and I won't name names because this is a company in my portfolio, right?
Of course.
So actually a couple. So this ties back to the successes are it's kind of a given that the CTO has to be totally involved. There is, in fact, there's no way a company is succeeding if the CTO isn't up to par, because it's just again, sorry, I'm kind of limiting myself to the technology startup scene, but I think that's what we're talking about here. But it's, I think, where failures or potential failures that can be avoided, a CTO can be very helpful in that. It's like, so let's say, as again, we talk about how the company grows and so on. So there was this one example in our portfolio. They were growing, and there was, at every step you have to take decisions. So you'll say, even something as simple as React versus Flutter or something like that, right? A typical, oftentimes what we've seen is CTOs will say, okay, this is, from a maximalist perspective, right? What is the best from a technology perspective? Let's just go after that, and that's accurate. That should be, in an ideal world, be followed. But in this case, let's say there is, there are more or easier hires available in the React world versus a Flutter world, let's say. And again, nothing one versus the other. I mean, Flutter is, again, a great framework. There are a lot of folks who build extremely precise applications with that. But for this particular application, you had to be aware to say that, what is my hiring going to look like? What is my turnaround time for new features going to look like, right? It's not just from a pure technology standpoint. If I'm taking a decision, that could be siloed, but am I able to take a decision based on the entire growth journey of the company? I think that is very important. So we've had a number of instances like that, and CTOs have shined there. That's where it kind of draws a line between a good company versus a phenomenal great company outcome. So yeah. This
just reminds me of one more example, wherein in the background of all of it, CTOs are generally also responsible for their R&D spends, allocating it really wisely. There was the CTO within one of our portfolio companies, which was allocating a certain amount of spend to development of a new product, which was not really core to us, right, at that point in time. Today, that becomes the key value driver and changes the shape. I mean, of course, the sales team that sells it and all of that as well, right? But that won't have happened had there not been long-term vision of understanding that this product is augmenting what we're doing, and this is where I need to spend resources and time, even though there's a vision or like there's a board direction or directive to spend more energy and resources here, right? So that is one that definitely crosses the mind.
In your, sorry.
Go ahead. Actually, that R&D spend, actually, it's such a great example, right?
Yeah.
Because there a CTO becomes a CFO also, by the way, right? There are certain tax breaks that are specific to R&D spend. And again, you have to recognize that, okay, this is my maintenance budget versus this is my R&D budget, and can we get, so your $1 million funding could suddenly become $1.5 million because you suddenly got tax breaks from the government. So, yes.
Has there been any common, like, average cost allocated or percentage of budget allocated for R&D spending? Something that you have observed like that?
So, again, at seed stage, it's very hard. We don't do that.
Seed might itself be R&D.
Yeah. Yes. Series C and beyond, we've definitely seen that. In fact, at that point, we've also seen CTOs take a little bit of a, again, depends on the personality. So I've seen CTOs become the R&D branch, right, driving that, while the product and the existing support is separate, more like an IT CTO. So yes, we've certainly seen in terms of percentage, it really boils down. I think in this one example, if I'm not wrong, they were spending about 22% of their tech budget on the R&D.
Got it.
Yeah, no, the only thing I'd say is that, and this is for broadly the early stage founders out here, that there are multiple benchmarks that are available. And generally, it's going to be confusing once you're beginning out as to how to allocate resources. Generally, benchmarks are a good place to start when you really don't know. Soon into your journey, you'll figure out that this is what is more critical to me, and this is where I need to spend more time and resources. So use those benchmarks, I would say, wisely, not as the ground truth, but more so, this is a good point to start from.
Got it. Has there been any shift in observation? I know observations or expectations shift when it's between late stage and early stage. Is it the same case for an enterprise product versus an SMB product? Is there any difference in expectations? From a CTO, from tech, roadmap, or from R&D?
So the way we look at it, I mean, that's a actually phenomenal way to dissect it, because, and maybe I'll take it one step further. One is enterprise SMB versus enterprise consumer, let's say, right?
Got
B2B
it,
versus consumer.
Yeah.
So one clear difference that comes up there is when you look at a CTO role evolving as the company grows, for an enterprise or B2B product, there is a lot of tech sales that need to happen, right? So you need to be able to relate and understand your customer, and oftentimes the salespeople may not be able to do it, like non-tech salespeople, especially let's say if it's there are multiple products that will require a more tech know-how. So the CTO often successfully evolves into a tech salesperson, right? And versus a consumer where it's very, very different, right? You're talking about concurrent users, and you're talking about how we get the right user experience, and focus continues on the product side.
In most cases, it goes a volume game.
Yeah, exactly, right? So it continues to be on the product and volume security. But very different for enterprise.
Yeah. Got it.
Nothing much to add here. The only thing I'd say is you also need to not just differentiate from an SMB or a consumer perspective. There's generally also criticality of a single customer that comes in. Not that saying that a 10K ACV customer is less valuable than a $1 million customer, but the shipping velocity and hence changes. The shipping quality hence also changes, and hence you need to take that into account as well. So that becomes paramount, again, from a CTO perspective, that it is okay in certain cases to not ship 100% right product, but ship it fast. And in some cases, you need to ship it slow, and this has to be 100% accurate because there's $1.5 million at stake, right? So those
Got
things
it.
also matter.
Got it. Makes sense. I think we'll open up a little bit for Q&As from the audience.
Hey, hi, I'm Arvind from SecureTech. We are into cybersecurity. I'm the CTO. We are around 500 people company and Series A. So the one thing about our company is we have two CEOs. Yeah, two CEOs. So we have two co-founders and both are CEOs. So I'm the only CTO. So how to tackle two people?
Oh man, maybe I'll take that quickly because it's rare. But
I really hope they're not listening to this.
so I'll give an example maybe, and they can help relate, right? Outside of tech. So I used to, we spoke about the trading business before, so I used to run a trade desk at Jump Trading and started out. So there were two partners, right? One and Sean and myself, and the rest of the team, it was a very flat structure, right? So we really were not CEOs, but that's kind of where the buck stopped. And generally it happens in a partnership structure anyways. So there was a lot of confusion early on, and early we were just the two of us, and we were building also and deploying and being product managers, everything. As we started hiring, these confusions started developing. So one thing that we realized was working well was, despite the fact that the equal partnership, you can start dissecting based on functions, functional roles. And I think that will be just healthy for not just how you are dealing with the two of them, but maybe other people, right, across the organization. So if the two CEOs, and typically that's what we've seen in successful co-CEO roles, while there are certain decisions that either or both can take, but there is a clear functional areas that they separate out, and they kind of lead those functional areas. I think that is a happy medium, so to speak.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. The only thing I'd say is we have like half of my friends are developers and the other half are product managers. If you would have put it in front of them, the product managers would have said that this is how we feel. But in general, I'd say the one thing that would really help you is perhaps a constant vision for the company, which you can always put both them back to, that this is what we want to move forward, and this is what you wanted to move forward, and this is what aligns, and this is what doesn't. Right? So eventually, but again, it really boils down to people management at the end of it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi. One of the funders I was talking about, and he was saying that VC only fund into their network, right? And mostly fund to their network. So what is the best way to be in your network? Yeah.
I think that was a really nice question.
No, honestly, I wish I did. Would have made my life more easier. None of the investments that we have made personally, like I would say, I have happened within my network. Within the portfolio also, I don't see a lot that have happened. It's practically fairly limited. The idea, and to be as honest and frank with you, the idea is to, and as selfish as well, right? The idea is to make money at the end of it, right? It is not to pass money on, which we feel should not really work out. So in general, that is not the idea, and more so, networking helps for all reasons, and we actually come here to network as well. On the contrary, to find the best founders here. So it is, I would say this is my job as well as yours, and that's what we try to do.
Yeah, very well said, Madhur. Very similar. It's not, so both ways, right? It's not that we only would fund, via warm connect, so to speak. In fact, our inboxes are always open. You will see that, go to our website, ping us, you'll always get a response. We try and get back to you within 2 or 3 days, max 5 days. And by the way, we have made investments through these absolutely cold outreaches some of them are excellent investments. But taking that one step further as to why do people say, come through the network, I think it just builds one level of trust, and that's all, right? Now, this is a proxy of the trust that builds a rapport between two individuals, because it's longer than a typical marriage. You've got to be working together. So, but you can use other proxies for trust, for sure, right? If there is any other, like a portfolio, if you were to share with us, and everyone is kind of only separated by 5 or 6 degrees of freedom. It's not a whole lot. So you don't have to know someone XYZ directly, but just build some trust around it. And by the way, that's also a good reflection. Again, maybe we can separate out consumer versus enterprise or B2B startups, but in B2B, it's not just fundraise. When you go out and try selling, it'll be the same thing, right? People, you'll have to start selling through your network first. It's very difficult to just go out, do cold outreaches. So I think it's just a little bit of a balancing act, but there is, again, for us, very similar to what Madhur said, please reach out to us, find us wherever we are, inbox, we'll always respond.
Thank you.
Hello, hi. Thank you for the insight so far. So I'm the CTO of a company which is about 40 people right now, and we are a fully remote setup. We have our engineering in India and a product and sales and marketing in the US. And
Hello?
Hello? Yeah, all right. Were you able to catch what I said so far?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So I can very well relate to what you said about how the role evolves over time. Initially, when we were just 2 people in the firm, I was writing code, and now I'm finding myself doing people management almost the whole day. And especially being in a remote company, I find myself in the nexus of communication from the US and the Indian teams. And a critical part of what I do is ensuring that the priorities are set right, everybody knows what they have to do, and they're doing it in the pace that we want. So just want to expand on that. Have you noticed any difference in traits in CTOs between remote and non-remote companies? And just what are your thoughts on that? What do you look for people in those roles?
Yeah. Maybe I didn't give it a shot, and Madhur, you can add. You're right. By the way, congratulations on building that 40-odd team fully remote. It's not easy. Really, hats off to you. So yes, there are certain differences in how you would run a fully remote team versus, right? Because just what we call the water cooler chat, right? There is a inherent value to it that comes. A lot of the things that could get done. By the way, as a VC firm right now, we're fully remote. Right? I have 2 members here, but typically we don't see them for days. So there is a difference in process. So how you would set up your processes and communications, very clear communications, availability. So again, how do you mimic, let's say, being in the same office while you're remote? And it sounds like you're also doing this across different time zones. That's an additional level of challenge. But let's say, simple things, as an example, like we're always available on WhatsApp, for instance, or whatever your mode of communication signal. It just gives a feeling that you're not waiting for that next meeting to happen or put something down, reach out to someone, schedule something. It shouldn't happen, right? You should always feel free to do that, and your team should feel free to do that. So there are certain differences in communication, but at the end of the day, I think it's really having that trust factor across your team and having them know that you're available. And some teams have been built extremely successfully remotely. So I think there are multiple examples that are remote first. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, for sure. In fact, on the plus side, I'm sure you've seen this, you've been able to hire talent very, very, if you're not looking for talent only in the 10-kilometer radius, then you can go out and have flexibility both on the talent quality and your comp structure and so on, right? Yeah.
I think, sorry. I just adding to Ravi's point over here. So because you're not at a close physical proximity, you miss out on a lot of data points that you generally tend to observe. Like, is this person as chirpy as always? Or right. So in my team, we implemented this practice where right at the start of every meeting, we just do a round of, hey, are you good? Something, if a person tells out loud that I have a headache, even something as simple as that completely changes the tone of the meeting for that person for the rest of the day. And it's for the good, right? So you understand how, you lessen your load on that person slightly so that the person comes back refreshed, and then they take a, much more heavier load. So that has worked for us, if that helps.
First of all, I completely hear you and understand you. We've seen that a lot. We ourselves go through it because primarily it's a global fund, 4 different offices, time zones vary by 12 and a half hours, and managing all of that becomes slightly difficult. What has helped a few of our portfolio companies primarily is in a Bangalore office, one of our floors is something that's always available to our portfolios. So I've seen, what I've seen is that a lot of them, once a month or once a week, do end up closing everything that's important. And then what is even more important is what Ravi mentioned, the trust. So if there's no trust, it's always going to be at the back of your head if things are going to get through or not. So there are obvious advantages, getting the right talent, which you might not have if you were limiting yourself to a geographical restriction, at the right compensation structure. But you will have to figure out ways, like some of them do quarterly offsites, while some of them do monthly get-togethers, which is 2-3 day hackathons together, figuring it out and getting your priorities right for the next month altogether, right? So whatever works for you, you'll have to find that right balance, and that would not happen till there's ubiquitous trust in the team.
I think we have a question there.
Hi, I'm Arun. I'm co-founder of one of the dev tooling. I just wanted to reiterate on your question that you were saying founder-led tech sales need to be done. So for dev tooling to sell into the enterprise space, it takes a lot of time. So my question is around sales cycle, like how much time for founder-led tech sales should be going towards these measures, and how do we define typical sales cycle? Like for us, it has been like 3 months, 6 months, 1 year for enterprise clients as well. So how do you see the solving this puzzle around?
Yeah, that's really a tough one. It's a great question. You're right. I mean, there is. So it varies by the product for sure, right? So it really depends. Like in your industry, so one thing is maybe you should benchmark what is the right one in your industry. Is it taking 3 months or 9 months or a year? And a number of times people will say, look, start with maybe mid-market where the cycles might be a little bit shorter. As far as the founder-led sales, actually there is really no substitute for that, right? It really, I've seen some people try out, let's say, agencies, or you can have SDRs, for instance, to actually kind of enhance your bandwidth a little bit, just from getting some leads sorted out, meetings on your calendar, and so on. But it really, there is unfortunately no real substitute in that 0 to 1 journey. After that, of course, once you find that PMF, you should absolutely set up teams, maybe even cohorts where you have 2 SDRs and AE and so on, and give them the job, and they'll keep. I think even up until maybe 10 million ARR, you'd still need to be closing as a founder, right? But maybe the CTO doesn't need to be there all the time. I think it's more of a CEO or if there's a product person, they could be doing this, and they should be doing this more often than the CTO. Right?
Yeah. It works finely. I mean, there's no substitute for founder-led sales. You'll have to do it in the beginning. You'll have to do it for a long time. And I think so it becomes increasingly important for you to do it because you are a founder of a dev tooling company, right? Your understanding of the product and your ability to sell to the customer that you're selling to is far superior than someone who's non-technical in nature. What we have seen primarily is, specifically when you go enterprise, and I assume that's your question, buying is difficult, and buying is difficult primarily because it's generally they're replacing something, and if something goes wrong, it's their neck on the line. It is not something like, I try your product and it goes wrong, it's fine, nothing really matters. But for them, the buyer, you need to think from a buyer's perspective, things get on the line. Like a Fortune 500 company, if things stop for a minute, the revenue loss that happens is crazy, right? So at that point in time, it is going to be a longer sales cycle. It is going to be a longer trial period, and you'll have to actually benchmark to see if you're fitting across or not. There are different strategies that over the last couple of months, I spent a lot of time speaking to a lot of sales leaders from India who've scaled revenues to $20, $25 million in the US. And predominantly, all of them said that we hired teams and we fired teams. We had to do it ourselves, build that motion, and then replicate that. You really need to have an entrepreneur or a founder-first mindset to be able to do that. So that has to stay.
Yeah, hi. Myself, Arun. To extend the question of Arun, will that affect the sales cycle? Like, will that affect the investment? For example, from your perspective, from you're going to invest it, and we're developing a product for months or maybe years, but initial days when you go for a B2B or an enterprise level sales, it takes a lot of time. As you mentioned, 3, and then it may be 6 and beyond that also. So will affect your investment? For example, if I'm going for a pre-seed or a seed or anything in between that, will affect the investor from your perspective?
I think so. There are investors for different stages and different places. There are people who would come and will be willing to underwrite that risk, that the product's going to be sales ready at a particular point in time. And there are going to be investors who would want to wait it out and see what a steady sales cycle look like, right? Talking about RTP, we invest at pre-seed, seed, and A. There are certain risks that are willing to underwrite, and in a lot of cases would be okay to underwrite that risk. So predominantly, I would say it is going to be investor-specific. Stage of the fund as to where they invest, the kind of companies they invest into, and that perhaps if you talk to someone who's more confident when there's a PMF established and a GTM motion that can be replicated, they would of course care about it and would not invest, right? So you'll have to target your investors specifically on the basis of the stage and what is figured out, what is not, and what are the risks for the company today.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Leo also very similar. By the way, one way to perhaps soften the blow on this, and both from an investor lens side and for your own team's sanity side, is maybe get some design partners early on. If you can get those, it also helps in your product development cycle as well. Quicker feedback. You're not under pressure to actually do a full-on sale. Because that cycle is very, very different. Versus if you can find some folks who are willing to be design partners, and also, as Madhur said before, their neck is also on the line if they get the wrong product. So there are some folks, absolutely, even in large corporations, who will be willing to take the risk of helping address a pain point that a team outside is addressing. How can they contribute with some data, perhaps with some feedback? Maybe someone can actually dedicate a couple hours a week for you to go over the product development cycle with you. So that is a good sign also. So that kind of soften the blow is to say that, hey, it doesn't leave it binary then, so at least you're getting some feedback along the way.
Hello. I think as CTOs, we are generally seen as the crazy scientists in the group, but then we are also the people who get the credit card last, like everybody else gets the credit cards first. So is there any healthy way in which, as you already said, like CTOs, and especially in technical companies, they overlap with other people a lot. So is there any healthy way in which they could influence their role more, or and not sound evil or crazy?
I think, and I'll try to rephrase this. So typically CTOs get the credit last, and are there ways to kind of move them up the stack and be more involved in the success and recognition of the company? Yeah. I know it's like there's the foundation stone or Neve ki eat, as you say, right? You are the Neve ki eat. It's just that the entire company doesn't stand unless that foundation is there. But no one really looks at the foundation. People are looking at the facade and everything else. So I hear you. There is how do you so increasingly so I think in more new age companies, the gap between let's say, developer and revenue is shortening. By the way, we have a great, I don't know if they're here, DevRev is a great friend of ours. In the name, it is developer and revenue, coming together. So I think that is a general trend also. Everyone is realizing that, if the company has to be moving faster at a certain pace and reach a certain stage, the tech is equally important, if not more, right? I think it really, I don't know, there's no silver bullet answer here, but perhaps the partners that you're working with, right? I think they should really, you should have a good chemistry with them, where very, very, very often, folks will actually go out and do stuff together. Meaning that if there is, you should probably be joining, let's say, large customer calls. I don't know if it's an large enterprise product. Certainly should be joining these customer calls sometimes. And even developers, I think, are now, you can spend maybe 5-7% of their time kind of speaking to customers, just being more front facing. I think it really helps, not just on the recognition, but that's a side effect, I think, a happy side effect of it. But they, that actually helps bring back a sense of, reality into the product or into the tech stack. So yeah, I would say it's, it's an ongoing process. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have time for one more question.
So hi, my name is Anshu. I'm a founder at Procure Yard. I believe since CTO needs to know how the sales work to get those insights, to build the deep expertise, so does the CEO. They also need to know how the sales work. So how you compare CEO come CTO in one org versus having a separate role? I mean, at what stage they should get to a separate role of having a CTO? So there's a founder who has expertise in tech and can work on both the sides and facets. Would you prefer to, would you suggest to have a CTO as a separate role altogether? If yes, then at what stage?
I think that's a really nice question, especially with a lot of indie hackers coming up, a lot of one-person companies coming up.
Honestly, I'd say it is the combination of them. As to, it is supposed to be, like a car won't run on 3 wheels, it still needs 4, right? The ability to be able to deliver things as a unit, your skill sets which are not there, to be covered up by the person who's co-founder or the person with you, starts making sense, right? Like, you really don't need an expert CTO who's also an expert in sales, but someone who really understands and is able to take the business side of it and be able to replicate that into products so that the product is able to sell. Similarly, if that CTO is able to be a better salesman than CEO, then that's also great. Like, there's no harm in that. But the 2 of you or 3 of you together as a team, are you able to tick all boxes and you function as a well-oiled machinery is what really matters. At least that's how I look at it.
Yeah. And I think your question is, can one person, can you have a CTO CEO, right? Yeah, so absolutely, why not, right? I think, so typically what we've seen is that the sales and the product function kind of ends with the CEO, and then the CTO is more on the tech side. But there's no reason for that not to happen. It's just, I think, there's certain skill sets, as Madhur is saying, that land on the front facing or on the CEO side, or maybe the question here was also suggesting. But absolutely, I think it eventually boils down to the bandwidth, right? How are you, if you're able to manage the bandwidth, So CEO function is not just sales, by the way. Well, I guess it's sales, but sales to different stakeholders, right? It's fundraising, it's customer, it's sales, right? Hiring, all of that. So if you're able to manage the bandwidth, let's say you have a product person come in, lead the product, VP product, or like a VP engineering, and then you could still be the CTO and the CEO. I wouldn't mind that per se, but it's a question of the bandwidth.
Eventually, it has to be a well-oiled machinery. Works like if there's only one person driving it, it's completely fine. If the 3 people, if there are 2 people reporting into that one person, till the time it works fine, all the skill sets are there, I don't think so we'll have a problem.
Thanks, Madhur. Thanks, Ravi.
Thank you so much.
That was a wonderful session, and thank you for being such a great audience.
Yes, the audience, the questions were amazing. Thank you so much, folks.